The sun burned over the Arizona desert like a living fire, painting the canyon walls in shades of gold and copper. The wind carried the dry scent of sagebrush and dust, and the faint echo of gunfire still hung in the distance. Eli Carter reined in his horse, a big chestnut mare slick with sweat. His hand still trembled from the fight behind him. 3 men were dead, a 4th had run into the rocks and vanished. And all for a debt that wasn't his. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, breathing hard. "That should settle it," he muttered. From behind the wagon, a soft sound answered, a muffled cry. Eli turned sharply, his Colt half raised. But what stepped out wasn't a bandit or a bounty hunter. It was a woman. She stumbled into the light, her dark hair tangled, wrists bound with rawhide rope. Her skin was bronze under the sun, and her eyes, even through the dust and fear, held the kind of strength that made him forget the world around them. "What in God's name?" he whispered, lowering his gun. The woman didn't speak at first. Her lips were dry, cracked. She looked like she'd been dragged for miles. Eli moved forward slowly. "You're hurt." She flinched at his voice, pulling back like a cornered wildcat. He stopped, hands raised. "I ain't gonna hurt you, miss." She stared at him for a long time before whispering something, a single word in Apache. Eli didn't understand, but the tone was clear, distrust. He knelt down, cutting the rope from her wrists. "Easy now, you're free." She looked at the broken rope, then at him, confusion flickering across her face. "Why?" she asked, her voice hoarse, her accent thick. Eli holstered his Colt, "Because they were the kind that take what don't belong to 'em. And I don't ride with men like that." She frowned, trying to make sense of him. "You fight, for no gold." He smirked a little. "Guess I had some debt to pay. You just happened to be in the middle of it." The woman looked at him for a long moment, then finally said, "Tala." He blinked. "That your name?" She nodded. "Tala." He touched his hat. "Eli." The desert wind carried their names away like a secret. Hours later, they rode under the blistering sun. Eli had given Tala his canteen and an old poncho from his saddlebag. She said little, just held tight to the horse as they crossed the open plain. Every now and then, she'd glance at him, like she couldn't decide if he was savior or fool. When they reached a patch of scrub trees by a shallow stream, Eli pulled up. "We'll stop here till sundown." Tala slid off the horse, limping slightly. Her ankles were bruised where the ropes had rubbed raw. Eli crouched by the stream, filling the canteen. "You from around here?" he asked. She didn't answer. He looked over his shoulder. "You got family?" Still nothing, just the sound of the wind moving through the grass. Finally she said, quiet but steady, "You do not ask Apache where they come from." "Desert listens." He gave a small laugh. "Fair enough." For a while, they sat in silence. The world felt endless, just sky, wind, and 2 strangers with no reason to trust each other. But Eli noticed something as the light shifted. Tala's gaze never stayed still, she was watching everything. The river, the horizon, his hands. She was alert, like someone who'd been hunted before. "You expecting someone?" he asked softly. She looked at him with calm defiance. "Always." That night, they built a small fire. Tala spoke little, but when she did, her words carried weight. Eli told her he was a ranch hand from Texas, heading west after losing his land in a bad deal. She listened, though her face stayed unreadable. When he asked what those men wanted with her, she only said, "They trade women like cattle." "You stopped them." He frowned. "You mean they were slavers?" She nodded once. "They wanted Apache blood for white gold." His jaw tightened. "Damn." The fire cracked between them, throwing orange light across her face. She looked tired, but strong. The kind of strong that didn't come from choice. He caught himself watching her more than he should've. "You ain't gotta be afraid of me," he said quietly. Tala's eyes flicked up. "You think Apache woman fears Cowboy?" He smirked. "Guess not." "Then you wrong," she said flatly. "I fear nothing, but I remember everything." The way she said it made the night grow heavier. Before dawn, Eli woke to the sound of horses. Distant, but closing. He grabbed his rifle, motioning Tala to stay low. She didn't ask questions, she slipped into the shadows, silent as smoke. 3 riders appeared over the ridge, not bandits, not bounty hunters. Their ponchos carried tribal markings. Eli froze. "Apache," he whispered. Tala stepped forward suddenly, calling out in her language. The men stopped. One of them, older, broad-shouldered, dismounted. The look on his face when he saw Tala was sharp, almost painful. He said something fast and urgent. Tala replied, her voice cracking halfway through. Eli couldn't understand, but he could feel the emotion. The older man turned to Eli, his expression unreadable. Then he said, in rough English, you take her. Eli hesitated. No, sir. I found her. Freed her. The man studied him, then nodded once. You have debt. Eli frowned. Debt. The man pointed at Tala. She lived because of you. Apache pay their debts. Eli blinked. That's not. But the old man interrupted, raising his hand. You come. Chief want to see. Eli's stomach turned cold. Chief. Tala looked down. My father, she said softly. By midday, they rode into an Apache village hidden deep in Red Rock canyons. The people watched Eli with narrow eyes. He could feel their suspicion like heat on his skin. At the center, an old man sat by the fire, his hair silver, his face carved by time. He didn't need to speak to command silence. Tala approached him and knelt. The old man placed his hand on her head, murmuring something in their tongue. When he looked up at Eli, his eyes were hard. You saved my daughter, he said slowly. Why? Eli swallowed. Because she needed saving. That's all. The chief's gaze lingered on him, like he was searching for truth. Then, to everyone's surprise, he smiled faintly. Then you are not like others. He stood, turning to his people. Apache do not forget honor. This man took no price. He will be our guest. Tala looked up sharply. Guest, not prisoner. Eli let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Appreciate the hospitality, he said, though he wasn't sure he believed it. As the sun dipped low, the tribe gathered for a meal. Tala sat near the fire, her face softer now, a quiet pride in her posture. Eli sat apart, uneasy under the stares of half the camp. But when Tala brought him a bowl of roasted corn and venison, she smiled faintly. You eat, you live, that is Apache way, he nodded. Reckon I owe your father for that. She looked at him for a moment, then said quietly, you owe no man. You paid your debt in courage. He looked at her, really looked. For the first time, she wasn't just a stranger he'd rescued. She was a woman born of strength and history, and now, by fate, tied to his. The night around them glowed with firelight, and though neither of them said a word more, the air between them changed, not just with gratitude, but something neither dared name. The morning sun crept across the red cliffs, spreading light over the Apache village like a blessing from the heavens. Smoke curled from the cook fires, and the air smelled of roasted corn and cedar. Eli sat near the edge of camp, watching the people move, silent, graceful, alert. He still didn't know what he was doing there. Every part of him wanted to be on his horse, riding back to open plains in quiet freedom. But something held him, something he couldn't name. Or maybe it wasn't something. Maybe it was someone. Tala. She was speaking with two women near the well, her laughter faint but warm. Her hair shimmered in the sunlight like black silk, and her eyes carried the same fire as the desert around her. Eli couldn't help watching. Every time she glanced his way, he pretended not to notice, but he did. Every time. That's when the chief's messenger appeared. A young warrior named Noka, tall and serious, with feathers braided into his hair. White man, Noka said, voice low. Chief calls you. Eli stood, brushing the dust from his coat. Guess I shouldn't keep him waiting. Inside the large tent, the air was cool and filled with the scent of sage. The chief sat near a carved wooden bowl filled with glowing coals. His eyes were sharp, but not unkind. You rest, the chief said. You heal. Good. Eli nodded slowly. I'm grateful for the hospitality, sir. Didn't expect it. The chief leaned forward. Apache, remember the blood that saves life. You saved my daughter. That is sacred. Eli frowned. You don't owe me anything. The chief smiled faintly. That is what you think. But Apache see the world different. The spirits choose balance. You take from death, you give to life. Eli shifted uneasily. And what does that mean, exactly? The old man's gaze grew heavy. You will stay until the moon is full. You will help our people rebuild what was burned. After that, the spirits will tell if your path and my daughter's path are one. Eli blinked. Your daughter. The chief nodded slowly. The desert saw her pain. The spirits saw your courage. Sometimes, fate ties two souls before the heart understands why. Eli's heart thudded in his chest. Sir, with all respect, I didn't. The chief raised his hand. You speak much. The spirits listen more. Go, work, learn, then decide. Eli opened his mouth to argue, but stopped. The old man's eyes held the kind of wisdom that didn't bend. So he nodded. All right, I'll stay till the full moon. Days passed. Eli worked beside the Apache men, mending fences, helping build water trenches, and tending horses. At first, no one spoke to him much. But when they saw he worked hard and asked for nothing, their silence began to fade. Tala watched from a distance. Sometimes she'd bring him water or dried meat. Other times she'd just stand nearby, her presence steady and unreadable. One afternoon, she approached while he was fixing a wooden pen. "You work like Apache," she said. He looked up, smiling. "I take that as a compliment." She tilted her head. "Maybe it is." He leaned against the post, wiping sweat from his brow. "You always this quiet?" She hesitated. "Words can lie, hands cannot." Eli chuckled. "Guess that's true, though my hands ain't much good at talking." Tala looked down, hiding a small smile. "They speak enough." The moment lingered, soft, unspoken. Then she turned and walked away, leaving him staring after her, heart pounding harder than he wanted to admit. That night, music drifted through the camp, drums, flutes, the heartbeat of the earth itself. The tribe was celebrating the return of the chief's daughter, and Eli stood at the edge of the fire circle, unsure whether to join. Tala danced with her people, her movements graceful and fierce, her dress glowing red and gold in the firelight. She looked like the spirit of the desert itself. Eli couldn't look away. When her eyes found his across the flames, something changed in the air. Time slowed, the firelight reflected in her eyes, and for a moment, it felt like no one else existed. But then the drums stopped. The chief stood, lifting his hand. "Tonight, we give thanks. The spirits have returned my daughter. The white rider who brought her back has honored our tribe. We honor him in return." Eli stiffened as all eyes turned toward him. The chief's voice deepened. "Before the next moon rises, we will see if his spirit walks with ours." The words rippled through the crowd. Eli didn't fully understand, but he saw the meaning in Tala's face. Surprise, fear, and something else. He realized then, this wasn't just gratitude. The tribe was preparing to bind his fate to hers. Later that night, as the fire burned low, Eli found Tala sitting by the river, her reflection trembling in the water. He sat down beside her, careful not to startle her. "Didn't mean to interrupt." "You didn't," she said quietly. He watched the river flow for a moment. "Your father, what did he mean by that?" She didn't look at him. "He means what spirits demand. My life was saved. Now it must join with the one who saved it, until the desert releases the bond." Eli stared at her. "You mean, marriage?" She finally turned to face him. "In your words, yes." He blinked, stunned. "Tala, I didn't rescue you expecting." "I know," she said softly. "That is why it matters." The words hit deeper than he expected. "I don't belong here," he whispered. She smiled sadly. "Maybe the desert disagrees." For a long time, they sat in silence. The moonlight shimmered on the river. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, not with hunger, but sorrow. And Eli knew something inside him was changing. He'd come west for freedom. Now he'd found something else, something more dangerous. Something he couldn't walk away from. As dawn broke over the valley, the world felt different. The tribe moved quietly, preparing for the ceremony that would come in 3 days. Tala avoided Eli's gaze now, not out of anger, but fear of what the future might bring. When she finally spoke to him again, it was with a trembling voice. "If you stay, your life changes forever." He looked at her, steady. "Maybe that's not such a bad thing." She shook her head. "You don't understand Apache law. You cannot leave once bond is made. You become part of the tribe, part of me." He swallowed hard. "And if I refuse?" Her eyes dropped to the earth. "Then the debt remains unpaid. The spirits will take balance, through blood." Eli's breath caught. "Yours or mine?" She didn't answer. The wind rose through the valley, whispering through the sagebrush. The same wind that had carried their names the day they met. And in that sound, Eli heard his fate calling, not in English, not in words, but in the language of the land itself. The sun rose heavy and bright over the desert, spilling gold over the canyons like a sacred promise. The Apache village stirred awake slowly, and with it came a sense of something bigger than morning, something ancient. The full moon was 2 nights away, and everyone knew what it meant. The binding ceremony. For Eli, sleep had been a stranger. He'd spent the night walking near the edge of the cliffs, watching the stars fade into fire. Every thought led back to Tala, her voice, her eyes, and the unspoken truth between them. He hadn't planned to stay this long. He hadn't planned to feel this much. But life didn't always ask. Sometimes, it simply took. As he turned back toward the village, he saw Tala kneeling near the stream, washing her hands in the cool water. The morning light caught her hair, and she looked like she belonged to another world. He hesitated, then walked toward her. "You always up before the sun?" he asked softly. She didn't look up. "Sun waits for those who respect it." Eli chuckled quietly. "Guess I still have a lot to learn." "You learn fast," she said, glancing at him with a faint smile. He crouched beside her. "I'm still not sure what your father expects of me." Tala's smile faded. "He expects you to accept what you already began." Eli frowned. "And what if I can't?" She met his eyes, calm, yet filled with storm. "Then the spirits decide. They always do." Before he could ask what that meant, the air around them shifted. A sudden stillness, like the earth itself holding its breath. Tala turned toward the ridge. A single rider appeared in the distance, kicking up a trail of dust. Her eyes narrowed. "That horse." Eli squinted. The rider was alone, but the way he sat in the saddle told a story of danger. His coat was long, black, and worn. His hat cast a shadow over his face. The rider stopped at the edge of the village, raising his voice. "I'm looking for the cowboy named Carter." Eli's stomach tightened. "That's me." Tala stepped in front of him. "Stay back." But it was too late. The chief and his men emerged from the tents, watching silently as the stranger dismounted. He threw something into the dust, a piece of rope, old and frayed, still stained dark red. Eli's blood ran cold. He knew that rope. It was from the fight weeks ago, the men who'd been holding Tala prisoner. The stranger's eyes met his. "You killed my brothers that day, cowboy. You think you can hide among these people? Apache land don't forgive trespass." Tala's jaw clenched. "They were slavers. Murderers." The man sneered. "Maybe. But blood calls for blood." He reached for his gun. Before he could draw, Eli stepped forward. "You want me, not them." The stranger smirked. "You got that right." Tala grabbed Eli's arm. "Don't." "The spirits." But he gently pulled away. "Ain't no spirits gonna decide this. Just a man and his choices." Dash dash dash. The two men faced each other in the blazing sunlight. The tribe watched from a distance, silent as stone. Even the wind seemed to wait. Eli's hand hovered over his holster. The stranger's eyes gleamed with hate. For a heartbeat, the desert froze, then thunder cracked from both guns. Dust rose. When it cleared, the stranger stumbled back, clutching his chest. His revolver fell into the sand. He stared at Eli with disbelief, then collapsed. The echo of the gunfire faded into silence. Eli stood still, chest heaving, smoke curling from his barrel. Tala rushed forward, eyes wide. "You should not have done this." "He gave me no choice," Eli said quietly. "The spirits always give choice," she whispered. The chief approached, his face heavy with something more than grief, understanding. He looked at the dead man, then at Eli. "Blood answers blood," he said solemnly. "Now, the balance must be made." Eli frowned. "What does that mean?" The chief turned to the tribe. "He has defended Apache honor. He has taken Apache blood upon his hands. The bond must be sealed, before the moon rises." Tala's breath caught. "Father, you mean?" He nodded. "The ceremony will be tonight." Eli looked between them, confused. "You mean, it's final?" The chief's gaze softened. "You cannot walk two paths once the desert has chosen." Dash dash dash. That evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, the tribe gathered in a circle of light. Fires burned high, painting the sky in gold and crimson. Tala stood at the center, wearing a white woven shawl decorated with eagle feathers. Her eyes searched the crowd until they found Eli. He stepped forward, clean-shaven, dressed in the simple hide shirt they'd given him. He looked more Apache than cowboy now, though the stubborn spark in his eyes remained. The chief lifted his staff. "The man who saved life now carries the mark of death. To restore balance, his spirit must be bound to ours, to hers. So the land knows peace again." Tala's hands trembled slightly as she took the red cord from the chief. She wrapped one end around her wrist, the other around Eli's. Their eyes met, two worlds colliding in silence. The crowd began to chant, the sound low and ancient, echoing through the valley. As the cord tightened, Eli felt something strange, a pulse deep inside, like the heartbeat of the desert itself. When the chant ended, the chief spoke. "What was owed is now fulfilled. What was separate is now one." The cord burned with light, then fell away, turning to ash. Eli exhaled. Tala looked up at him, tears glistening in her eyes. It is done. He reached out, gently touching her face. Guess the desert decided after all. She smiled through tears. No, you did. Days passed, and peace returned to the valley. Eli helped rebuild the fences, hunted with the warriors, and learned their ways. The tribe began to call him, Red Sun Rider, the man who came from the fire and brought balance. But every evening, when the sky turned gold, he'd find Tala by the river. They'd sit together in silence, their reflections touching on the water. He once asked, "You ever wish I'd never come?" She shook her head. "If you had not, I would still be lost. The river brought you, the spirits kept you. That is enough." He smiled softly. "Reckon I'll take that as love." Tala looked at him with a teasing glint. "Reckon you should." Months later, when traders passed near the valley, they spoke of a cowboy who vanished into Apache land and never returned. But those who traveled deep enough into the desert sometimes saw two riders at dawn, one with sun-bleached hair, one with raven-black braids, riding side by side through the golden light. And they said, if you listened close, you could hear laughter on the wind. Not the sound of loss, but of love, the kind only the desert could keep.